want to tell you about my walk with Jesus. I was one of the 12 that was with him, and I walked with him for 3 years. And I think I've gotten a bad reputation. It's been my life experience that if something looks too good to be true, it probably is. But after I met Jesus, and certainly after I began to follow him, I saw him do a lot of things that I couldn't explain. For example, he fed a crowd of people, men, women, and children, with just a few pieces of bread and a couple of fish. I saw him give sight to a man who'd been blind since the day he was born. I saw him cause someone who'd been crippled their whole life to be able to walk, not just walk, but leap, jump for joy. And I couldn't explain those things, and that bothered me. But I finally decided that there was something about Jesus that I either didn't know or I didn't understand that was the reason he could do all these unbelievable things. One of the most unbelievable things that happened with Jesus was what happened with our friend Lazarus in Bethany. We got word that Lazarus was sick. And after a couple of days, Jesus decided that we should go to Bethany. Well, none of us thought it was a good idea because Bethany was close to Jerusalem. And the priests and the Pharisees in Jerusalem hated Jesus. And we didn't know to what lengths they were willing to go to keep him quiet. But Jesus was determined. And I was the one that said at that point, well, let's go and die with him. I wasn't being fatalistic about the situation. I was being realistic. Jesus had been such a great friend and had taught me so much about life that I thought it was only fitting that I go with him to face whatever consequences he might face. Well, by the time we got to Bethany, Lazarus had been dead for a few days. And Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Now let that sink in. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Well, after that, the fury of the priests and the Pharisees just grew. By the time of Passover, the tensions were high. The pressure was mounting. We had the Passover meal together, and Jesus told us that he was going to die. After the meal, in fact, shortly after the meal, he was arrested, and in just a few hours, he was crucified. Crucifixion is an end. It is a terminal event. The Romans had developed crucifixion to the point where it was the most painful and humiliating form of execution known to man. They could even control how quickly a person died on the cross. They were professional executioners. And the professionals said that Jesus was dead. Well, I didn't know what to do. Even though I'd sort of seen it coming, and Jesus had told us that it was coming, I was devastated. I was crushed. I couldn't see going back to my old life. Jesus had taught us so much that any other kind of life seemed very shallow and meaningless, but I couldn't seem to move forward either. I was stuck. And I decided that what I needed to do was just get away from everybody for a few days to sort things out. Well, after a few days, some of the other men that had walked with Jesus for the 3 years found me. And they told me the most outrageous story. That they had seen Jesus and that he was alive. I said, don't do this. He's gone. The Romans said he was dead. Maybe we can live our lives according to his principles as a tribute to him, but we just got to figure out how to move forward. But they kept on. They were insistent. And their stories had enough detail to where they almost sounded plausible. But listen, dead people do not rise. Well, all right, I know. I just talked about Lazarus, but Jesus did that, and besides, Lazarus was not crucified. I don't know. I don't know. I was just trying to make sense of it. I finally told them that the only way that I would believe that Jesus was alive was if I could see the nail prints in his hands and touch his wounds. Well, a few days later, we were together again. We'd gotten together in a room. We had closed and locked the doors because we were a little bit concerned about what the priests and Pharisees might want to do to us. We were there together, this group of people, and then all of a sudden, there was one more. And the doors had not opened. Now, how does that happen? He looked different, but familiar at the same time. He came over to me. I didn't know what to say, and I couldn't have said anything anyway. And then he said my name, Thomas. And when he said my name, all the doubt went away. And you know, he seemed glad to see me. Can you imagine? He held out his hands for me to see the nail marks, to touch his wounds, but I didn't need to. Against all reason and logic, Jesus was alive. I said the only thing that I could say at that point, my Lord and my God. Then Jesus said something. He said, Thomas, you're blessed because you have seen and you believed. Blessed are those who have not seen, and they're going to believe anyway. I think that was Jesus' way of saying, Thomas, you haven't had a whole lot of faith, but I love you. Others are going to have more faith. And I wouldn't argue that point with anybody. I'm just glad that Jesus showed me that much grace. And in that moment, in that encounter, I had the understanding that I'd been looking for all along. Jesus could feed a crowd of people. He could give sight to the blind. He could heal the lame and wounded. He could do all those things because he was the Son of God. I can have complete trust in him, and I can live in hope and victory. I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he could love me, a sinner condemned unclean. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. He took my sins and my sorrow suffered and died alone. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. When with the ransomed in glory His face I at last shall see,